Joining us now in the studio, Senator Nicole Akins-Boyd. She represents Lafayette and Panola counties up there around Oxford, Batesville, and so forth. And you chair the Senate Universities and Colleges Committee.
I'm the vice chair.
The vice chair, I'm sorry.
Chair.
Yeah, well, that's still important, of course, and high ranking. But you're in the area because you guys have been conducting some insurance hearings with a special focus on telemedicine and how that might be affecting our laws and in particular our insurance regulations and so forth. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So yesterday we held hearings on the wind pool.
Okay.
That really affects our coastal counties, and then today we have been delving into telemedicine again.
Okay.
And so we had a bill this year, and we had it passed the Senate twice, kind of in a version that we had, and we held hearings on it during January, really looking at telemedicine. One of the things that, if there has been a silver lining in this pandemic, it has been the expansion of telemedicine.
Yeah. And
so when you look at healthcare dollars spent, only, and this is something that came out in the hearing again this morning, I think it's kind of a startling statistic, is only 5% of the healthcare dollars are spent in primary care. And so one of the things that telemedicine does, it accelerates primary care. It makes it much more accessible to this whole state.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that's really important to us. We know we have a physician shortage in the state. And so being able to do telemedicine really provides the opportunity to get to all parts of the state. And so that's kind of exciting. Another statistic that was brought out is we're using and expanding telemedicine to specialty care as well. And so only 53 of 82 counties have a 40-minute drive to any specialist in the state.
Wow.
So that's a lot of counties that we see not covered. And so we saw an expansion of telemedicine greatly during this time. And so we had a number of people testify. We had the American Academy of Family Physicians. We had Teladoc, which is the largest national telemedicine company, come testify. We had Dr. Alan Jones from UMC. And UMC is, a lot of people don't know, it is one of two nationally recognized centers of excellence on telemedicine. And as Dr. Jones said, not only do they do it, but they study it and the efficacy of it. So it's great to have that amazing resource here in the state. So when telemedicine came about, during this pandemic, they expanded the bulletin and to require coverage for telemedicine visits where maybe there haven't been provider pay for that. Yeah. And so we looked at a bill this past year that would really really codify what the bulletin had in place so that we can make sure there's some reimbursement for that. And so we that bill made it through the Senate twice, and then we got to conference, and we weren't able to agree with the House on conference. So this time we're having hearings with the House. It's the House and the Senate insurance committees together. And so hopefully we can avoid that process in the future, and we can kind of all hearing the same information. Hopefully we can get on the page a little bit better.
Well, are you sensing that the providers, which I think were already on board, or certainly the adoption has accelerated, as you indicated, as a result of the pandemic? I think they're seeing the value big time. But what about the carriers? I mean, that's always been the sticking point, is the insurers have had some heartburn over this.
They have. And last year we invited them to testify, and they did not choose to testify last year. And there have been no outreach from them that they wanted to testify this year. If you look at long-term studies, what we're hoping is, and many of their representatives were there today, is you're saving healthcare dollars.
Sure.
So for the insurers, looking at this as primary care, we're hoping they're going to get to the table. One of the statistics that was thrown out today is the VA has really adopted telemedicine. System-wide, they've saved $1 billion a year.
Yep.
It's amounted to about $6,500 a patient. So we're hoping that our insurance companies can see the cost savings for them in making sure that that people get to those primary care providers.
Yeah.
One of the areas that has really exploded during the pandemic is our psychiatrist and where they see. And so we had one psychiatrist testify this morning, and he kind of gave a breakdown of kind of the patient population. He manages a large group. And anyway, 10% of those visits are in person. 80% of those are audiovisual telemedicine visits. And then he has another 10% because of where people are located across the state, are just interactive audio only. So they're not audio visit. They don't have broadband. There's economic issues or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and for him, he really brought out the fact this morning that telemedicine has actually increased their patient base because people are no longer having to kind of deal with those social stigmas of going into the psychiatrist's office.
Yeah.
It's also allowed them to be more on demand. And we know as the world, we're going more and more to, we want instant.
Yep.
And so it has been able, though, to really help them, really manage a crisis as it's happening. He brought out a situation talking with a family who has have an adult with autism, 18 years old. And, that's something near and dear to my heart because I have a child with autism. And so he talked about, it's really opened their ability to be able to have a visit within the home so they can actually see what's going on to the home as they can see it themselves. They don't have to have a family related, and they can really give, a better treatment plan.
Yeah.
And so I think, there's a lot of things that have come out of this that are good, and this is one of them in the pandemic. So I think now that we know that these options are available, I think you're going to see it expand more and more. And also, too, a number of the physicians brought out the point that they are able to send devices to, instead of thinking that the patient's really depressed, they've sent a sleep apnea device to him, and they found out the patient had severe sleep apnea. So that was what needed to be addressed in the patient. First and foremost, before any type of depression, was we needed them to get a good night's sleep.
Yeah, no question.
So, so there's a lot of things that have been brought out to this. The details, we're having some, there's some groups saying, well, we need an inpatient visit first. Other people are saying, well, it depends on the specialty. So those are things we're going to have to work out and, try to see where we can work out with that. But, there's other, and particularly looking at the specialties, so for psychiatry, as they were pointing out, they can, they don't have to have an inpatient first. Inpatient is always optimal, for everyone, but can we accomplish what we need to accomplish and still offer these patients a strong standard of care, kept being brought out over and over again.
And it's great information there, Senator. Appreciate that. But this push to light up the rural areas of our state with broadband, which I think has been widely supported in the legislature, of course, and lots of money has been poured into that, and saw the lieutenant governor give a little update on that last week at a Madison County function, Madison County Business League. I serve on the board over there. But you think about perhaps one of the best returns we could get on that investment would be to leverage telemedicine and telehealth in order to keep our population, especially in the rural areas where they're so far away from specialty care, for sure, to keep them healthy. But that has major and broad economic implications as well.
Absolutely. The statistics this morning on what that you saved, not what patients saved, is absolutely not. They didn't have it broken down for Mississippi because they save time off work.
Yep.
They save travel time. And so the statistics nationwide of what that's been able to do for patients, saving their...
Unbelievable.
It's just unbelievable.
You can stick around with us?
Stick around.
We'll talk some more when we come back. Senator Nicole Akins-Boyd is our guest. Senator Nicole Akins-Boyd is our guest here in the studio. We were just talking about the Insurance Committee hearings, and in particular, a focus on telemedicine, telehealth. And I think it's fair to say, Senator, a couple of years ago, you probably wouldn't have had a hearing even to discuss this.
I think that we would have said, I think we would have looked at it as a little bit of voodoo medicine.
Yeah.
And we would have assumed that you could not get the same standard of care on telemedicine that you can get in an office visit. But technology has advanced so much. And as we were talking earlier, and we heard in our education committee hearings last week, the pandemic has accelerated
No question.
our technology use, 5 to 10 years, at a minimum. And so things that we didn't do, couldn't do, or whatever, we now see is completely possible.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for this state, particularly this state, when we're have so many needs when it comes to healthcare access,
Yep.
that we use all the tools in the toolbox, as people say. So,
Totally agree.
yeah, so this is just one more thing that we can do that enables Mississippians to have healthcare access.
Yeah, and the concept is instead of the patient having to travel to the doctor, this is the doctor essentially going to them.
Right.
It is electronic, and there are some limitations, but every day there are new applications that break through some of those limitations, and that is good. There's a situation that I share in presentations I do with respect to eyeglasses.
Yeah.
And just vision and vision care, and the number of folks that need vision care that just don't have access to an ophthalmologist to seek just a simple checkup to determine if they need some sort of visual aid. And now there's technology that allows you to do that on your phone, literally. I mean, it goes through the same process that a physician would do in their office when they're flipping all the magnifiers back and forth, and it'll hone in on your eyes and determine exactly the prescription you need, send that prescription to you, and go have the glasses made. That's an example.
Yeah, and I mean, and as someone who is legally blind without her contact zone and wore Coke bottle glasses, which she was very early on, that's something that's incredibly important to me. I mean, nothing kind of breaks your heart worse that you go visit a classroom and you see the child that has the book so close.
You know they need it.
And you know that they need that vision care. And so there's been some things passed in recent years where they're doing more eye screenings in our schools early on.
Okay.
And I think that's so vitally important. And so adding to this technology where you can go to your local optometrist and say, hey, here's what this is, and get your eyeglasses, I think we need to do whatever we can to increase that access.
Totally agree.
And this is economical too.
That's exactly right. That's totally so much could be saved with respect to health care that would impact us all in a positive sense, in the way of preventative care.
Right.
It's when it goes to a point where, gosh, now we got to take some sort of corrective action, and that not only is expensive, but it usually makes for a likelihood of a worse health outcome. It's a lose-lose situation, whereas this could ward off a lot of that. It's a win-win. So I'm glad to see the legislature here taking that up, and hopefully we'll get some common sense legislation out of that providers and carriers and lawmakers can all agree to.
We're hopeful. We're very hopeful that we're going to get something, kind of working together. And we had education hearings last week.
Yeah.
And one of the things we were looking at in our education hearings is looking at the health insurance for school teachers and looking at where we lined up in comparison with the other states, kind of in the southern region, and looking at the cost of their health care plan for their families, if they have their families on their plan.
Okay.
So, and it's high.
Yeah.
And
it's very high.
Yes. So we need to do whatever we can to really lower those costs, and telemedicine, I think, is definitely a way that we're going to be able to kind of help continuing to do that. So
I have opined for many years that so a lot of folks, when they focus on, well, how do we drive the cost down of health care and health insurance in particular, that's where most people experience their health costs. And you hear all sorts of ideas about selling insurance across state lines and all sorts of other adjustments. Folks on the left would say, well, it's the CEOs of the insurance companies, they make too much money, which is, a drop in the bucket. It's not even a drop in the drop in the drop of a bucket of the total health care costs. But the only way truly, I think, to address the rising cost of care is through technology. And I don't mean just telemedicine and telehealth and electronic records and so forth. Those are all part of that. But the advances in health care that are being driven by novel technology are incredible, and especially if we can prevent disease, if there are uses of technology that can prevent disease and expensive bad outcomes.
And we had Ochsner's healthcare system, which most people think is a Louisiana-only company,
Yeah.
and that's not. We know that they have partnered now with a number of hospitals in South Mississippi, and
Yeah.
I think scheduled to partner now with Meridian. And their physician head of telemedicine went through even ER visits.
Yeah.
Those things that they can do on the front end that will continue to reduce cost, because what we know is primary care reduces good primary
question.
care reduces long-term medical cost, and that's what we've got to make sure that we are continuously increasing in Mississippi is good primary care.
Totally agree. All right, so with respect to your vice chair of the Senate Universities and Colleges Committee, what are some of your priorities there, legislatively speaking?
I think we'll continue to look at the efficiencies of what we're doing. We also, the schools, the response to COVID, dollars came in, how they spent those dollars.
Yeah.
And we're kind of in a unique time with COVID with universities and colleges.
Yeah.
So we need to continue to look at that. Dual credit will continuously be an issue that we want to make sure that we have. It's a good thing for our Mississippi students, and we want to make sure some of our community colleges have kind of not been made whole in that process. So
Yeah.
I think that's something we're going to continuously look at, is making sure that they're made whole in the process. And we're going to continue, look at efficiencies and look what we can do to make the system better as a whole. I'm a member of it's a joint committee of the House and the Senate, and we go look at the properties around the state, and we spent the summer kind of looking at that. They didn't do it last year because of COVID, in person, and
Yeah.
so we go and look at what their needs are, and so that's really helpful when you go back and look at this, because you've seen it firsthand.
Yeah.
So, and we see how they're growing, and what their real needs are around the state.
Yeah.
So.
We've got fantastic universities. We've got fantastic community colleges. We're blessed in that respect here in the state of Mississippi. And they're turning out some incredible talent. The problem is they all leave. And I know you're aligned with me on this view that when we start keeping them here, we'll really see our economy take off.
I think so. And it's kind of interesting you said that. I'm going to actually be doing some focus groups, just me personally.
Yeah.
And I've got some young people, because young professionals that are going to leave the state. And I want to know what are all their reasons for leaving the state.
Good.
And so it's something I'm just going to do on a personal level.
Good.
Because I think that we're overlooking some things that we might need to have conversations about.
Yeah.
But I don't know, so I'm going to hear it from them.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think we sit back in our ivory towers and say, well, it's because this, that, and the other. Well, we need to go talk to the people that are leaving. What are you leaving for?
Yeah. And a lot of them will say it's jobs. Some of them that I hope that we can attract back. I think, it's very attractive to say you want to go to a big metropolitan city.
Sure.
What I also want to see, too, is what we do to get them back. And I'm in a community where we see a lot of those people coming back.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that they're coming back for is I'm fortunate. I represent, 3 top-notch school districts that are doing really, really well.
Yeah.
And we see families, coming back from Virginia, California, all over, that are coming to our area because we have good quality public education.
No question.
So, what are those things that we can start getting them back to?
Yeah, that is awesome. Well, I applaud you for that. I mean, because getting that firsthand information and digging right to the core and consuming that, analyzing, processing it, and then taking action, that's the way you got to get it done, not just sit in the Capitol, as you know, and just, I heard this, that, and the other. So good job. Appreciate that.
Thank
Senator,
you so
thanks
much.
for having me.
And happy birthday.
Yeah. We will come right back here on Midday. Stay with us.